Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 9th episode of the Health System Fix podcast. My name is Dr. Gaurav Mishra. I'm an adult and child psychiatrist. I'm very excited today. I have on Vernita Todd, who is a dear friend and a mentor. Vernita is the Vice President of Senior Health Services at San Ysidro Health and San Diego PACE, where she oversees the organization's comprehensive program for seniors. San Ysidro Health is a large federally qualified health center in San Diego, serving more than 160,000 patients in Southern California. Vernita started at San Ysidro Health in 2019 as the Chief Strategy Officer. Fun fact, we started at San Ysidro Health a couple months from each other, and I served as the Chief Behavioral Health Officer for about 6.5 years till June 2025 when I left. And Vernita, the whole time, has been an amazing champion, mentor, guide. Vernita moved to California in 2016, where she was a Chief Experience Officer for Health Center Partners of Southern California, which is a consortium of 17 federally qualified health centers. Vernita is also a lifetime member of the National Association of Community Health Centers and has been honored twice. In 2014, she was presented with the Elizabeth K. Cooke Advocacy MVP Award, and in 2017, she was inducted into NACHC's Grassroots Hall of Fame for advocacy work. Vernita is also the president and founder of Human Capital Group, which is a nonprofit and works with organizations to help with strategic planning and change management. She's a motivational speaker, and I've been motivated by her many times, so I can definitely vouch for that. She's also on many boards, and I'll mention a couple. She's on the California Endowment board overseeing HCAI's work, and she's also on the CalPACE board, which oversees all of the PACE programs, which is programmed for all-inclusive care for elderly in California. So welcome, Vernita. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra. You said call you Gaurav, but I'm so stuck in Dr. Mishra. It's my pleasure to be here.
I've had the pleasure of learning from you and speaking to you for almost 6-7 years now. I want our listeners to get some of that wisdom from you. But I'd like to start with early life. So tell us a little bit about, till the time you went to college, just thought about education. What is life like as a kid, maybe till you were about 18?
Wow. Okay. Way back in the day. Well, thank you for that opportunity. It's really interesting, Gaurav. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a musician. So I play clarinet to this day. I've played for over 40 years. I actually went to college on a music scholarship to be a band director and spent 4 years pursuing that degree, and kind of got to my 4th year, finished my coursework and realized I needed to do student teaching and my senior recital. And the realization hit me that I didn't really want to be a band director. I had always loved playing, and the route for me was either being, a Bachelor of Science and just a performance major, or a teacher. And so when I realized, wow, that's not what I wanted to do, I was a little disillusioned. I went home and worked for my parents for 3 years and realized I really didn't want to do that. And then went back to school. So when I did go back to school, I almost started all over again because music was very specific and focused. And so I had a 120-hour music minor. That tells you anything. But when I went back to school, I pivoted. I first went into political science. I thought I was going to go to law school. I decided I didn't want to do that. And I went into psychology. So I got an undergrad in psychology. My interest after college, then when I got the undergrad, I thought I wanted to go into industrial and organizational psych. And at the time, that was, the psychology of people at work and all of that. But it was much more related at that time to ergonomics and pretty the industrial side of it. And my interest was really people spend too much time of their work for work to drain their spirit. And I found that organizational development and organizational behavior address that more than industrial and organizational psychology. And so then I made the pivot, and that took me past 18, but I grew up in Tennessee. I am the youngest of 5 children. My mother is still alive and 2 of my brothers. And we were a very tight-knit family. I'm fortunate. My mom's 86. She was a retired nurse. And it's odd that I ended up in healthcare because I never wanted to be a nurse, but that's where my career has led me, through a few A few distractions and side roads, but here I am.
You described a couple experiences that didn't end up being your final path, but at the same time, I do think all the things we do and experience have an impact in who we are ahead of us. So can you think and tell us that education and music is, I'm sure there's some learnings there which help you work in strategy, and how do you think that ties into some of the things you're doing today?
I'm so glad you asked that. I would tell, I still am a music lover and I believe in the power of music. I believe that all teams, I played in an ensemble. I wasn't a soloist. I played in an ensemble, which means I was a part of a team. So I needed to come and be prepared and play my part, but I didn't need to stick out, right? If I wanted it to be about me, then the sound was off, right? Because I was supposed to blend, not stick out. The lessons that you learn in music beyond the science of math and science, right? But the understanding that it doesn't matter. If I'm not good at what I do as an individual, in orchestra, I can't hide. I'm the only person playing my role. In an ensemble, in a wind ensemble, there might be 5 clarinets, so I can pretend. And in organizations, that's the same, right? It's typically not only one person. And you identify, why is it still dropping here? Why is it still dropping here? Till you go one by one and realize you don't know your part. Right? But you could hide until I stopped everybody and made you prove it. Right? And so I think as a leader, what we're talking about there is accountability. Right? How do I learn about who's dropping it unless I check and see what they're doing, right? And I have to do that whether it sounds good or not, because they could just be not playing. I know I'm getting deep and kind of weird about this.
No, it all
The
makes sense.
other thing is about learning how to follow. In music, you have a conductor who's standing in front of you and waving his hands. He's giving you the time. He's giving you the volume. He's giving you the emotion. And your job to make sure, whether you're playing in 4/4 or 7/8 or 3/4 or 2, or the tempo's fast or it's slow, is that you're watching him so you know when the downbeat comes. So everybody is at the same place. So it doesn't matter how good I am if I'm not paying attention, because I could still make an error. I've got to be able to follow or even if I'm the principal, the soloist, the number one, I've still got to be able to follow what's happening. And so many people, especially in the world of business, only want to lead. But then I tell them, have you ever heard a great concert and heard some instrument or some organ, the trumpets are too loud, or the drummers came in wrong, or I don't hear the percussion. What's happening here? And that's because they don't learn to play together. And then we all look bad. You don't just look good, we all look bad. And so I think there was a lesson in music that is valuable and has taught me well. And I'll be honest with you, Garv, one of the things that taught me the most, not even out of music, is I grew up working in customer service and fast food and waiting tables. And that's the best thing I ever learned about how to work somewhere. Because as a waitress, you could be really hateful to me, but my livelihood depends on you. So do I give what you give me, or do I give you what I think you want in order for me to give a good tip, right? Which means sometimes you talk to me sideways and I still have to smile at you and say, I'm so sorry, sir. What can I do for you? Even though I want to poke you, right? I want to meet your energy where it is. But I've got to be able to look down the road and realize meeting your energy where it is hurts me. So I could feel good in the moment and hurt later, or I could hold that in and get through the process. And I find so many people, when I interview folks and I know they've worked in service industries, that tells me something, because you either learned that lesson or you haven't. So you're right. College means some things and it teaches you how to do some things, but I've learned a lot of practical things both through my music degree, my service degree, and in the time that I worked for my dad.
There are so many lessons right there. A leader, they have to be good at what they're doing at the baseline. But at the same time, if they do not bring their team along, they're not a good leader. And then being able to switch to recognize, oh, you are one of the team players also, and to step back and go along with the greater plan. that switch from both being a leader to people and then being one of the people to somebody over you or just the organization is really critical lessons that leaders do need, and it is not easy to learn if you've not thought about it.
Well, and I heard somebody say just the other day, and I'm not sure where this came from. I meant to look it up, but recognizing that leaders, we're on team. You've got two teams. You've got the team of your peers, and then you've got the team that you supervise, right? So team A is, say, you and Maria and me or Katie. It used to be your old life, right? That team of people helping to make the decisions. But then all the folks below you that you were saying, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're doing it. I know you personally, I'm going to brag on you a little bit, helped create structure for San Ysidro Health, but you had to look and say, what's flying in the wind and what do we need to create structure around so that people understood their place and they understood what to do. So everything wasn't like I tell my team, y'all act brand new every day. It shouldn't be brand new every day, right? There are some things should just be easy because that's what we have to do. I agree. There are times you step in with your team A where you think and figure it out. And then there are times where you then dispel to the other team or disperse what it is they're supposed to be doing. And those are different relationships that you learn as whether you're the leader or the follower.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's go to your first experience in a healthcare setting. I know even before you came to California, you served as a CEO of a healthcare organization. So what was that experience entering healthcare and then getting to that high level? What was that journey like for you?
It was actually a interesting experience. So prior to that, I think I'll have to set it up. I was in training and development for nonprofit organizations, right? So at the beginning, I told you I finished my degree in organizational development. I took a job with the United Way. And that job was me as a regional trainer for 17 counties in northern Indiana, working with nonprofits that had one person to nonprofits that had 1,000 people, right? And my basic thing was governance and strategic planning and change management. There was a whole big Who Moved My Cheese thing back there in my lifetime when that was big by Spencer Johnson. And so I did that kind of dog and pony show quite a bit. One organization that I worked with was a health center, and I worked with their board on strategic planning and governance and getting stronger. They had no term limits. They had kind of not been paying attention, blah, blah, blah. So I'd work with them through this nonprofit at United Way about 3 years, and they went to hire their CEO. And the board chair said, hey, V, why don't you apply for this job? You've been working with us. And I said, because I'm not in healthcare. Hire somebody that's in healthcare. You just like me. Hire somebody that knows how to do what you need them to do. And so they did. They went and they did their search and they found a lady and she worked, and I continued to work with them as a consultant in strategy and so on. And she wasn't the strongest, but whatever, they hired her. And after 2 years, she was gone too. That same board chair came back to me and said, Vernita, why don't you apply for this job? And I said, because I'm not in healthcare. And I'll never forget, she was an MD, an emergency room doctor, and she looked at me and she said, I'm not asking you to see patients. I'm asking you to run a business. Can you do what you've been telling us to do for 5 years? And I thought, fair. That's fair. And I said, yeah, I think I can. So I joined them and as their CEO after a process and served there for 11 years. And really proud of the work that we were able to do. We tripled their patient population. We got them completely out of debt. They went from a lookalike to a federally qualified health center. They opened another site and pharmacies and all the things because at that time it was a nonprofit. And I never believe nonprofit doesn't mean non-business. And there were certain business components that they weren't paying attention to. They weren't paying attention to the money. They weren't paying attention to being efficient. They weren't holding people accountable. And so it was about coming in and building systems and building standards and learning to say things like, if it's your goal to remain employed here, which people didn't say. They just got away with everything. And my point is, this is what we need you to do. So if it's your goal, and it might not be your goal, but if it's your goal to remain employed here, this is what I need you to do. And the reason why I think that worked in that first arena, Garv, is because people don't go to work to fail. Nobody gets a job to feel bad about what they do. Nobody wants to come in and stink up the place, right? They want to come in. They might not want to come in and give you all of their spirit and energy because they're saving that for their family. But what they do want to come in, give you their best, get paid for doing something good and fair, and go home. And what we were doing was a disservice to them by letting them flounder, by letting them be confused, by not telling them they weren't meeting the expectation. Because guess what? We would juice them and juice them and juice them. Then they go to the next place and they get fired. And they'd be like, well, wait a minute, I was a rock star over here. But it was only because we were derelict in our duties to prepare you to do that. And so the thing our staff started to learn, and my leaders, is it is kindness that you show people accountability. That's kindness. That's integrity. That's excellence. Because we're like, I don't want to tell them. I don't want to hurt their feelings. But you want them to think they know what they're doing and walk outside and fall on their face. You let them fall on their face. And that's a culture shift for leaders who are so used to being nice. You know, here at San Ysidro, we have in San Diego PACE, clear is kind. Clear is kind. If I'm clear to you about the expectation, that's what being kind is, not saying nice things to you and turning around and going, God, I wish you would quit. And so I learned a lot in that position, and I got a lot of credit for it. I got a lot of accolades for it, but all it really was bringing everybody to the table and saying, this is your role, this is your role, this is your role, and making sure they did it. Right? I didn't have to do a lot of the hard things, but I had to make sure the hard things got done. And that, I think, was the best teaching ground, because when I took that place over, we used to bring our own toilet paper to work. It was that place, right? But when I left, they were debt-free with 2 new facilities and 3 times the patient population, out of standardization. And I got people to stop saying, we're a family. No, we're not. You got a family. You go home to your family, right? But we are colleagues who care about each other, right? What do I call you? What have I called you? Always. Hello, colleague, right? I don't say this is my family, because you're not. You got a family. But you are my colleague in our mission to improve the world. And I gladly give you that, you know, from our frontline staff to our VPs, colleagues in the mission.
One of the things you said, such a critical lesson for an early leader early in their leadership journey, which I also faced, was you sometimes question, why isn't everybody doing the things the way you're doing or doing it to the best of their ability? A lot of times the systems they're working in, they are trying their best and they have found ways which are not ideal to get their work done. And that's the system really failing them, that the
Yes.
system is not set up for them to do great work. I think healthcare, if I had to summarize major problems in healthcare, I think that's what it is. The frontline teams, or many teams, are not set up to do their best possible work. That's where the leader needs to recognize it's not that this person doesn't want to do great work, as you're saying. They're not trying to stink up the place. They're actually trying to do great work. We haven't given them all the tools or set it up right for them to do it, which includes expectations and clarity.
Yes, I think that's in our larger environment too. So we're trying to stick people into systems instead of recognizing where people are and building the systems around them, right? And so I can tell you this is how we do it. And if it doesn't work for anybody, for me to keep that broken system is just arrogance and hubris. And that means I don't really want it to work. I really just want to be right. And so you challenge people who go in and say, but if you break that, it's going to cost money. Well, you keep messing up, so it's costing you money anyway. And it gives you the opportunity to say, I see you, Gaurav. I see it's not working. I want it to work for you. It's worth us trying to figure this out. But I also find that in some situations, people want to blame the system because they've not done the accountability part. They want to talk about how blah, 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 blah. And I don't believe in that as anecdotal. Show me. You know, all my leaders hear that. Show me. Don't tell me. Show me. And then what have you done in order to combat it? So before you come to me with you can't solve it, you better have tried to do something.
Yeah. Before we moved to California, once you first entered healthcare as a CEO and you were within the organization, healthcare is so different than many other industries. And it has a lot of similarities, of course, as we talk about the management. But what was something that was very different than you had expected, which is could be positive or could be, just a tough realization of this is how healthcare works.
Yeah, I think because I was young enough that I didn't have to use the healthcare system, right? That I had a different idea of what the healthcare system was until I got in it and saw the sausage being made and realized a hospital might charge you $1,000, but they're only getting paid $100. But if they're sending you the bill and you don't have insurance, they expect you to pay that $1,000, but they only charge Blue Shield $100. So it was some of those realities that went, wait a minute. This is healthcare. Why is this a for-profit industry? And so there were things like that about the larger system that disappointed me a bit when I really saw that it was a fiscal system more than a true health system. But what I learned the most with a federally qualified health center, we're very different than most primary care. You were in our world. We're very different. And so not only with the fact that we have compliance standards. So I always tell people about being an FQ, I learned about being in healthcare, is that you think it means, okay, you go to the doctor and they tell you what to do and you pay the bill and you go on about your business. And if you like that doctor, you keep going. That doctor doesn't have to produce their outcomes every year. They don't have to tell people how much money they made, how many people they saw, what their race was, what the gender was, what their conditions were, when they came in. If they saw pregnant women, did they come in the first trimester? Did they come in the third? They don't have to prove that their diabetics are under control. None of that, right? And so when I learned about the heavy compliance that proves the work of a community health center, it gave me pride. I mean, it was angst because it was a lot to do, right? UDS is crazy and the quality metrics that we were looked at. But I could every year pull out our quality scores and show them to anybody, anywhere, and say, look, this is why you come here, because 70% of all of our diabetics are under control. That means that they have a less likelihood of ending up in kidney failure in your hospital, Mr. Hospital CEO. And that's when I have that conversation that says, why do you want to contribute to us? Because we keep them out of your emergency room. And in learning that, that's how partnerships were developed. It wasn't just because we were the nonprofit safety net and people needed to partner with us. No, that became the business component that said, look, this is the return on the investment you have with working for me. The first thing I had to do when I took over that job, I'm not even going to say her name. She wouldn't be listening to this story, but anyway, the person who was the CFO had a debit card to our corporate business account in her pocket. Not a credit card, the debit card to our corporate health center account. And I said to her within about 8 days of learning that she had it, cut it up. You can't have it. I can't have it. You can't have it. Now, if we need to get company credit cards, right, with a limit that you can spend, that's one thing. And I'll never forget, Garv, she looked me in the face and she said, you're just going to have to trust me. Everybody else has trusted me. And I said, well, I'm not everybody else. And she said, well, if you don't trust me, I don't think I can work here. And I said, well, I'll accept your resignation. And she left. And we got better and stronger. And everybody was like, oh, I can't believe you're going to do that. So I had to go to the hospital because my CFO walked out and say to the hospital, look, I know you've got a ton of administrative accounting people. I need some help. And I had to be dressed down by this hospital exec because here was this nonprofit safety net health center that could never do anything right, coming and asking me for money and blah, blah, blah. So I ate that and I swallowed it because I needed something. What did I tell you about that waiting tables earlier? And I said, well, but we need your help and this is how blah, blah, blah. So they acquiesced and gave us somebody who they thought was going to come over there and just tell us what to do. Well, within 2 weeks, she was like, wow, this is so different than, your PPS rate and you get paid this way and this happens and you don't do this and you got this large uninsured rate. And this was before the ACA, way before. And so it helped me realize that we were looking at hospitals like they knew everything. And we were the experts in our CHC world. We knew what a prospective payment system rate was. We knew what the UDS meant. We understood what the compliance requirements were. We understood the sliding fee scale for folks that didn't have, just because we were the safety net and we weren't making all the money didn't mean that we didn't have value. It didn't mean that we weren't an industry that didn't deserve to be understood in our intricacies. And so in 3 weeks, he came to me. He's like, Vernita, I guess I'm just going to have to help you hire somebody who you can train to know FQHCs. And so it helped me not discount what we know and who we are in the CHC world. It helped me take the kind of shiny red off the hospitals know everything and we don't. And it helped me realize that, okay, we add value to this ecosystem as well. Right. And so we have to bring us and be strong and understand what we can stand and not stand in order to contribute, in order to be able to help the other smaller nonprofits that then started looking at us for donations because we got our act together. And so it was a system that fed a system, and one I was happy to perpetuate once we were able to do it, because then, you tell a friend and you tell a friend and so on, that type of thing.
Yeah. Every time I was telling your stories, very similar things that I experience, and those events are just flashing. There may be times that you're doing something big and system changing, and it's going to make it a lot better for everybody, including your team and the patient. But there are some people who will not go along with it anyway, and they may leave, and that's scary. But that may be okay, and that's for the better. That sometimes those changes will happen, and it'll go on. So let's talk about you moved to California. You started with health center partners. How do you think about if somebody in the healthcare space wants to start working in healthcare strategies? What do you do over time to expand your knowledge and awareness of how to do that work well?
Well, there's a couple things. There's kind of formal ways. I got a fellowship, so I am a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives, and so I got an MBA. You learn how to do some of that. So there's things that you can do through academia, because even if you want strategy, you got to understand finances. So there were ways to say, how do I get as smart as I can in the book world? But the real thing is, I think my advantage and strategy came in knowing the environment and why certain things meant certain things, because then that helps you to prepare. And the only reason I knew the environment is because I was in advocacy. Advocacy helps develop strategy, because you've got to know what's going on and what you want to go on in order to determine what your plan's going to be. And so I was a CEO in a very conservative state. I had to convince people who really may have felt differently about our patient population that they mattered and were worth funding. And a lot of times when I do that, I bring them in and put a baby in their arms, because you talk about strategy. What is a strategy? Because then the heart kicks in and the mind goes away. And so the learning the environment, what levers pull different things, understanding who's on what side of what issue is what helps you with strategy. Now, you could go and you could study Porter and all the people and all the strategic concepts and all the strategic models and all of that, but that's not going to help you build a strategy in the real world. It's going to help you put things in boxes on a template, but it's not going to say what is happening in the outside world. Well, Porter's forces, some of those things will come in, but if you don't understand, we're in a government shutdown. What does that mean? How is that going to have to do? What has it meant in the past? What does it mean right now about who can get paid? What won't happen? What will happen? What are the implications if these things continue not to occur? And that, you don't learn that in a book. You learn that by paying attention. You learn that by asking questions. You learn that by understanding where the dots go. And so I think paying attention helps you learn strategy. And I know that sounds pretty generic, but I would stand by that. As far as, if you know your business, then it will start to make sense to you what the next logical step will be. You will at least know what the next step shouldn't be. And sometimes strategy ain't knowing what to do, but it's damn sure knowing what not to do. And there are times that you're thinking that this industry is falling and the money's going away. Why would you keep investing in it? If you are so narrow focused that you can't look up and out around you, then your strategy will be insular. And Deepak Chopra said you should bend with the wind, not crack. If you know what's going on outside of you, you can bend like a reed. If all you know is this, then you're oak and you can break in half.
It's a similar quote from, I think it's a venture capitalist, and not as credible as Deepak Chopra, but he said you should have strong ideas loosely held, which means when you have new information, be willing to modify and change or how you're thinking about something. I think the point you made about advocacy and strategies, I'd never made that connection. It is so critical because in advocacy, you're really talking about stakeholders. And that is really the key of any strategy, whether you're doing a small implementation, which, I did in behavioral health, we started new programs. I knew the stakeholders had to, obviously from execs all the way down to my front desk staff, who's all going to be involved, right? So really knowing the stakeholders is such a key piece. And I'm sure advocacy really teaches you that to hone in very clearly on who the stakeholders are.
And because the different stakeholders are listening for different things. So it almost sounds cold and informal. But when I understand talking to a senator in the U.S. Congress is different from talking to an assembly member in Sacramento. They have different things, even though I'm still talking about PACE. I'm talking about it differently at the state level than I am at the federal level. I'm talking about it differently with a parent that's in PACE than their daughter who's looking for them to go in PACE. And so your question or your comment about stakeholder is right on. Everybody's listening to a different message. And if I don't know my business well enough to pivot to the message that matters to you, what is my strategy? Because my strategy is to make sure that people who need access to care through PACE get it. Full stop.
Yeah.
Independent, healthy, happy lives until they can't anymore. And however I need to get to there through you or through the government or through a funder is what I need to do. And I know all of y'all have a different thing that makes you smile. And if I'm not paying attention to what that is, then I don't care about my mission. And it sounds informal, but it's just the way the world works.
It is very true. And, I think one of the biggest, inefficiencies or poor implementation when I've seen it happen is when people have not thought about all the stakeholders. And oftentimes we do this and this problem is solved. People think of it very simplistic, but there are 5 people upstream, 5 people downstream, and 20 people around you, all of whom have some role or they're impacted by it, and all of you have to think about all of that if you want to really for it to go smoothly or go well enough. The strategy doesn't have to be at the exec suite level. You have to strategize at the very small frontline level too, as your clinical team is implementing things.
And it's so odd because, I told you I started my career as a trainer for the United Way. And one of the things I used to train people a lot on, in addition to the change management strategy, was logic models. If this, then what? So the inputs and the outputs and what the outcomes are and the outputs, what has to go in order to get what you want at the end. But it was always important that we always started at the end. That's a very Covey. Begin with the end in mind. What are you trying to make happen? And work your way backwards so that you don't think, okay, I want to get here and I'm going to do this and this is going to get me here and this is going to get me here, and realize that, well, that road took you back here. It didn't take you to where you were trying to go. So I think also knowing what are you trying to do? And like you said, who you're trying to do it for, who are the resources that are involved, who needs to be on your side, who do you need to keep away from folks that are worried about it, the whole 9 yards.
I'll take a quick detour, which is, did you ever have a strategic plan for your career as a whole?
Not even close. Not even close. I wouldn't have ever told you that this is where I would have ended up. What I knew is that my friends, when I was young, would say to me, I'd always say, I'm going to put it in your chart, because I thought I'd be a psychiatrist. It's funny talking to you. I'd say, it's going in your chart. And nobody told me when I got an undergrad in psych that I really couldn't work in psych unless I went to school for another 6 or 8 years. Nobody said that out loud while I was getting my undergrad degree. I wish they would have. And so once I realized I wasn't going to go into psychiatry, the psychology route, through INO psych was going to be different. I just knew that people spent too much time at work for it to suck. Excuse my language. You spend too much time at work for it to drain your spirit. And so I thought, whatever I can do. And so I didn't think that would be healthcare. But what I know, even in running PACE, nearly 900 people, is they'll match my energy too. So if I come positive, ready to make a difference, keeping our patients in front of them with a can-do attitude, everybody's not going to be like sunshine and rainbows, but they're going to understand where we're supposed to go. And many of them are going to match that energy because they know the value of what we do. And when you do that, I think you've heard me say this, Gaurav, the folks that we serve, people treat like they don't matter everywhere they go. And that's unacceptable here. And there's something about working for a place that says people matter and you have integrity and you deserve to walk this planet. And I don't care what language you speak, and I don't care what race you are, and I don't care how much money you make, and I don't care who you love. All those things doesn't matter to me, but you matter. There's something that feels in your spirit that money can't get to. And I like people to realize you could be making widgets all day, and that little place in your spirit doesn't get filled. Now, I know that's not going to make you love your job. I can't pay you enough to make you love it. I can only pay you enough to make you not hate it. Think about that. I can't pay you enough to make you love this job, but I can pay you enough to make you not hate it.
Right.
And so what makes you love it is what we do and who we do it for and what that little balm in your spirit it creates for you. And then the money helps you pay your bills. But you don't go home with a hole. But also you think you meet people who are trying to do their best. And that, what did they say? A rising tide lifts all boats if we're all doing this. And you go home, and because you know why I care about that? When you go home, then you smile at your neighbor. You pick up your kid and you help them with their homework. You call your mom because you're thinking about her, because you have the energy, not because you're drained and pissed off and sad and worried and all of those things. So if I can take a little bit of that angst away from you, you can give some good to the world somewhere else. And that might sound Pollyanna, but I believe that that's my role as a leader, to help create that environment so that you can then go create it somewhere else.
It is absolutely 100% true. And San Ysidro is very close to my heart. And I learned what grassroots means. Maybe first year and a half, it's a new job, I'm learning. But 2-3 years in, you understand what does it mean to be in a grassroots organization. It's all really different how everybody thinks about it. And a lot of times I thought about, my goal was, I want to make sure my team has everything they need to do great work. And if I do that, I know they want to do great work already.
Yes.
I just need to make it possible for them to actually do it. And in healthcare, people come to us in such a state of vulnerability. Just imagine any of us going to get healthcare with our doctor or nurse. And so it is our duty to treat that with respect. And I work at the juvenile hall about 2 days a week right now. And I know for sure those 2 days are going to be great days, because when I'm there and I'm talking to these kids, I'm 100% there. And when I walk away, I'm hoping I've made some impact, and I'm definitely feeling good about the work I'm doing. There's no question.
Well, and I think you said something that was critical. You're in the moment. It's not what can be. It's not the bitterness of what was. You're in the moment. You're enjoying it. You're creating something that can live and be positive in the moment. You're not wishing your life away, and you're not bitter about the past. You're present and can enjoy it, and people can feel seen and be seen because you're there, right? So I love that idea.
Yeah, let me ask you, as you're describing your life, when I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't know why, but that's all I wanted. So the day I finished med school, in my head at 23, I've not done residency, and I've just finished med school. And in my head, I have absolutely made it. So from that point on, everything else was a joy. All opportunities were exciting. Everything was fun. No struggle was hard enough, because I thought I made it. Even you love music. You got to go to school for music. You finished it, and then you made a decision, this probably is something I don't want to do. But you still got to live your passion and execute it till the point of a career decision making. I think that frees you up, right? So you don't have to, you're not so worried about where this is going at that point. Do you think there's something to it?
I think that has something to do with it. I also know, Gaurav, I was the first in my family to graduate from college. So that almost was you did it. That was the success. And there was so much that my brothers and look at my career aspiration and they're excited about it. They like how it looks. To me, it was just, ooh, this opportunity. Ooh, it wasn't go to this big job and go to this big job and go to this big job. It was, I only put myself in positions where I think I can make a meaningful difference. I was a strategy officer for a long time. I joined PACE because I see the value in it, the benefit of it. Also, because I know in the next 10 years, the greatest proportion of people are going to be seniors. We need a strategy that's ready for that before it gets here, right? We need to be thinking about and resourcing it and pulling ourselves. So I just have always seen what's the next thing, right? What's the way that I can do? And even recently, because I have a strong faith, I want to align with God's will for my life. And I'll just be honest. You asked me on here, so I get to say that. I don't want to work outside of that alignment anymore because I believe what people see in me is not me.
Right.
And I want to forever let that be the model that I work under.
So what people see in you is not you, is both, it's both a relief and a responsibility, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a bigger force out there guiding you, but also, let's say, true to that in your actions.
Right.
It's a responsibility too. It's not necessarily, okay, it's not just relief either, right? It's both.
Yeah, you don't just abdicate it just because it's like what's for me is for me. There's a responsibility that I have. I believe that there's a verse in the Bible that essentially, I'm going to paraphrase it, that says, speak for those who don't have a voice. And I'm often invited into rooms that our people or people who look like me or people that look like our patients will never get into. So if I don't open my mouth, who's going to open their mouth for that benefit? And I believe that is a responsibility for me. It has often been, my mom was a nurse. My dad had his own business. We didn't grow up poor. Now, my mom would say we grew up poor, but we didn't grow up poor, not what poor really is. And so I remember when I was in graduate school, they asked me to serve on this board as I was in grad school. And I said yes, and I was the only Black person on the board, right? And so we're talking, and I remember it was about young women having babies early or something. And they had this whole conversation about young Black girls having babies, being from single parent homes and not being educated and blah, blah, blah. And then that E.F. Hutton moment came when they all turned to me and went, Vernita. And so I had to think to myself, how do I respond to this? Do I go along with what they're saying or do I tell the truth? And at that time, I chose myself. So I told the truth. And I said, y'all, I'm not sure why you're asking me. I got 2 degrees. My parents are still married. I've never had a kid. All of these things that you're just looking at me to answer. And chances are my life experience has been more like y'all's than any of these women, but you think it's me because I'm their same color. And that hasn't been been my experience. And I remember that was really tough for some of those folks to hear because I'm pointed out that they were stereotyping.
I'm an immigrant, but I came to this country as a doctor. I was already a doctor when I first arrived in the US at 26. So I didn't have the same immigration experience as we talk about people who are having a really difficult immigration experience. And so I can say, yes, I'm an immigrant, but it's not the same. It is very different. If I had to leave the country, I would go back and be a doctor in India. It is not the worst thing. It was a great thing to be a doctor back in India too. So just being honest with your experience, it takes a little bit of time in your career to get there. I had a program director in my residency. She brings me in, first year of my residence in Detroit, Michigan. She brings me in and says, you're very dogmatic, right? And I did not know what the word dogmatic meant, but I knew from her tone, she doesn't want me to be. Well, yes, I'll work on it. Got out of there, went to a dictionary, then, and then for about 10 years, I was just not speaking up to what I thought to be true or give my opinion. And then I realized maybe 4 or 5 years ago that, I just said to myself, I'm being very dogmatic the last 2 years. I seem to love it. A lot of people just don't want you to question the status quo and speak your mind, which doesn't mean that I believe I'm always right. I'm absolutely wrong a lot. But at the same time, give your opinion, be open to dialogue, and kind of form the right opinion. That's another career question, because I'm working on this right now for myself, that all my life has been a lot around professional success and really working on it. And after a while, just professional success doesn't give you the level of satisfaction that it did early on. And I've been trying to work around, how do I do things which have impact on the community and which have a bigger meaning than my professional success. So I'm just trying to rewire my brain a little bit. So I don't know if you ever struggled with that, or did you work on it? Any thoughts on that?
It's funny that you say that, because there had been an opportunity in front of me that my friends in looking at saw as the perfect something for me, because they were enamored by the trajectory of it. And which I have to tell them, that doesn't define professional success. I don't need another higher title to be professionally successful. I mean, if I'm able to provide for this organization in a way that creates stability 10 years after I'm gone, that's professional success. The very first organization I ran after grad school closed after I left. They brought somebody else in, and she ran it, and it closed. And I take responsibility for it. So I didn't mention that. So my first year of grad school, I wrote a grant for a program called Court Appointed Special Advocates, a CASA program. It's basically court-appointed advocates or guardian ad litems for kids who are involved in domestic violence or in the foster care system. And so I wrote a grant in the town that I went to college, because in my grad school, that was my internship, my assistantship. And I wrote this grant, and they got it. That was the first grant I ever wrote, and I got it, and we brought the CASA program, and they said, great, your first year, you be the executive director. So these people that worked with me in grad school, there were a bunch of ladies who worked community benefit organizations and a couple of men around our community. They trusted me explicitly, which meant we ran a nonprofit. I was the executive director. They let me do my business. Now, because I wanted to do good, I told them the truth, I blah, 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 but they didn't question me. They let me do. They didn't hold me accountable. I held me accountable. So they did good. We grew the program the whole year I was there. We developed the processes, whatever. But I had trained that board on how to act. I had trained them that they could step back and not pay attention, because I didn't want them really paying attention to me like that. I liked being able to do whatever I needed to do, but I was holding myself accountable. The next person they hired, because I had trained them how to work with their exec, they treated her like they treated me, and she spent all the money and closed the place down in 3 years. I take responsibility for that. And that's why I can look and I tell Kevin or anybody, look, this is what you should be doing. This is how you hold me accountable. This is your job. This is what paying attention looks like. And probably the first time I took that job in Indiana, it was all about the board had been asleep at the wheel. And I was the big mirror here saying, well, y'all realize it ain't her fault that you're where you are, because you're the board. And I only had that conviction because I didn't want that place to shut down. Children lost access to court-appointed special advocates because of my arrogance. You understand what I'm saying? And I know I didn't close it, and I know, but had I created a system or a standard that they would have said, okay, V, show us this, tell us this is how we're going to check you, then they would have done that with the next person, and she wouldn't have closed that program down. It closed for 10 years before they opened it again.
You know, this lesson in leadership is probably the hardest to swallow, is that your job is to make sure this place still is running well when you aren't around.
Absolutely. That's what legacy really means. If it falls apart when I leave, I haven't done my job. If you're like, well, V's here and it's like she never left, then I've done my job, because we've created systems that are agnostic of the personality, that are agnostic of the leader, that are agnostic of the person who's just going to go 400%. We've created a system that goes around all of those. I'm not saying that we've done that yet here, but that is my goal.
Right.
With this organization that I'm at now, I feel like I've been given the opportunity by our CEO to say, tell me what you need and we'll do what we can within reason, right? You know, we don't get a blank check. But I have been given the opportunity to say, what do our seniors need? How can we do it and what's possible? So all strategy is that sweet spot between what's necessary, what's feasible, and what can we do? And then wherever those three meet is where your strategy exists. And I find that a lot of people, they know what's needed. Sometimes they know what they can do, but what's feasible? What are all the possible things that could happen? And then of that, what can you do that we need? And that's the sweet spot. But too often we're insular in what our abilities are. So we just want to take what our strengths are and apply it like a hammer to every strategy we go instead of realizing, hey, there's some stuff you don't know.
I've seen PACE for 6.5 years, and the best thing that has happened to PACE is that you're the VP. And I think you have an amazing team, like Dr. Tan and others who are just solid. So that gives me a lot of hope about that system working really well for the patients. What is the most exciting thing that you're working on at PACE, and what's the most challenging thing that you're working on?
Oh, that's fun. So there's a couple of things. One, the participants age with us. And the participant journey for PACE is frail elderly. Our goal is to keep them out of institutions as long as possible. Doesn't mean that we can keep them out completely. And so there comes a time as people age with us, their condition ages with us and costs go up. Nobody's paying us any more money, but those costs are going up because of our responsibility. So the leader in me, the most important piece is to say, if I know that costs are going like this, right? What can I do to mitigate that impact on the services that we're going to have? And honestly, Garv, that's like a puzzle to me. It's exciting to kind of look at what levers can you pull. But then I have the disadvantage that many people have is, do you have the accurate data that tells you which lever impacts what? Or are you just getting a bunch of data that doesn't lead you to making good business decisions? And sometimes we just get buried in data.
Yeah, I call unactionable data.
Right. So if I can't take action on this, I can't make decisions on this, this is just stuff. Or I tell my team, they give me data that I then still have to play with. And I was like, this ain't ready for me yet because you haven't told me what it means. What's the so what in this data? To what end? What does it help us? How does it hurt us? What is it, what does it advance? What does it delay? What does it solve? Or what is the problem? And have you ever seen the graphic, or it's like not a commercial, but it's like a cartoon, and it's all these people and they're lifting these big heavy rocks and they're just working all of this hard, heavy manual labor, and there's a guy behind him with a wheelbarrow. And he's like, "Hey," and they won't look up. "Hey, I can help you." They won't look up. And so they're spending all this time working hard, and the solution is standing right behind them. But they're working so hard, they don't have time for the solution. And so that, to me, is what unactionable data is like. That why get all of this stuff? So I'm excited about the opportunity for PACE. We're the largest PACE in San Diego County. We have another, 2 sites coming on in the next couple of years. I believe that seniors who need access to care have a really good future, not only with us, but 3 other PACE programs that are currently in the area. And they're going to need all of us at our A game, not just us. And so I will close with this if you're running out of time. We have a lot of people that come see us at San Diego PACE because our boss is like, "Sure, let me introduce you to Vernita. Sure, come on." Or Kevin can talk about PACE in his sleep. He knows it. He ingests it. That's one thing about working for somebody that you can respect, who knows their business. And he's never going to watch this, so it doesn't matter. But I can tell you, because it's true, there's something for anybody who's talking about career. There's something about working for somebody that you trust. There's something about working for somebody that cares about who you're serving, that makes all the hard stuff a little easier. So when I am able to go to Kevin and say, "Look, this is the world I see. This is what's happening. This is how we're going to justify it. This is what we're going to do," I have somebody who I know cares about the end as much as I do. but who's also going to hold me accountable for, fees being $30 million. Dude, get that under control, right? And that's what you need. You need roots and wings, right? Roots to say, hey, don't forget the important stuff, and wings to say fly so that this PACE program can serve as many seniors as possible. And I feel like that's the edict I've been given by our CEO and the board of directors. And everybody doesn't have that luxury. I believe it was not provided to me as an accident. What did I tell you? I'm of faith. And what you see is not me. So it's being blessed because I know what's valuable. I don't make the most money of everybody. You never heard me say that, did you? But what you heard me say is I found value in my job. My boss respects my judgment. I have a team that wants to win. And we have a mission that's righteous, worth more than checks with commas in it.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't mind making checks with commas in it. Don't get me confused. I wouldn't mind double comma checks, but I'm just saying, it's more than that.
Right. What you're reminding me of is a mentor told me a few years ago is that I was still thinking about titles. And you've mentioned this also, like titles don't matter. Yes, titles don't matter if you have them.
Right.
Yeah, they said, like, stop thinking about the position and start thinking about the impact, which is exactly, I think, why you're in the role you're in. And I'm excited about, what you're going to do for the team and for the patients, of course.
Appreciate that. That's nice. And, I feel you're a friend and a colleague no matter what you do. And if we work together, I felt aligned with you, Gara, from the beginning. And so I'm always rooting for you no matter which direction you go in. And like I say, I consider you a friend and a colleague.
Same here. I think we met very early when both of us started, and I think we were aligned very quickly. And, a lot of the projects, like CCBHC included, you had a major role in making sure that even got off the ground. So, I definitely thank you. I can talk to you for 3 or 4 hours. Appreciate your time today and also just the wisdom. But we'll catch up together again soon in person.
I would love that. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.